Peter Mackay here. We've got Anthony Carey from Core-Tex today, and we're doing a series of demonstrations on what he's developed to help separate the lower body from the upper body in the golf swing, and also techniques we use in the clinic for our trip and fall patients, for our people with vertigo and tinnitus and different things. Basically a great all-around tool for working with balance. So Anthony, why don't you step up there and show us that one drill we were just talking about. In this drill here, what happens is Anthony's going to secure his hands on the wall, much like you're doing your chops and lifts in the golf swing and separating. The upper body's going to lift in the backswing, for example. You see what Anthony's doing here. He's emphasizing his downswing pattern, but he's creating an isometric compression against the wall. So he's giving feedback, aren't you, Anthony?
Yes.
Into the front of your chest, into the feeling against your arm.
No beliefs.
Yeah, I really love this because we spend so much time using our eyes for visualization for different sports, different activities. The reality is everybody's a field player. And until you own the feel, you'll never have the automaticity that it takes to have that repeatable, beautiful swing. Okay? Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate that. Tex, and we've just been doing a series of demos on separating the lower body from the upper body in golfers. And I wanted to emphasize, Anthony, today the fact that when we use this in the clinic, we're always emphasizing what happens with the cerebellum, the back of the brain. It's been shown over the last few years. We never used to realize this. When I went to school, it was never even thought of. Cerebellum was considered like the junction box for coordination of movements, hand-eye, posture, stability, right? But what we know now, it also connects with the emotional centers in the brain. So when you're looking at physical balance, there's also an override into the emotional balance. That's the way those circuits work. So in training the physical balance on here, we're having an effect on that.
It's got to have some connection to performance, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, because what happens when you're under an anxiety situation, under the gun, performing under pressure, they call it, right? Your stomach might feel a little queasy. You might even have a little bit of a tremor. So that's where you're eliciting a dysfunctional pattern, perhaps through the cerebellum. In other words, your balance is off. And it's driven through the psychological components that are connected to the amygdala, the fear center, and the hippocampus in the brain. And until recently, we didn't realize that those circuits were so communicative. That's where ADD, ADHD, autism, the treatments for that now are really zeroing back in on helping improve function in the cerebellum. So if you have issues with performance, if you have issues with physical balance, there's a coincidence there, there's a tie-in, there's a relationship.
Makes sense. So
yeah.
Is there a way that you would utilize Core-Tex to address that or begin to address that with a patient?
Right, and we've shown that in some prior videos. In the clinic, we'll have you focus on a spot where your head will move but your eyes stay fixed. Okay. That's called the vestibular ocular reflex. If you want to step up here right now, why don't you show us some of the drills you do? I know you do some of the head movements and eye movements when you're on the Core-Tex.
Yeah, we'll do something where we'll actually have the eyes and the Core-Tex and the head moving in sync versus keeping the eyes completely still as an option.
That's a form of what we call smooth pursuit. And that's actually what happens when you're looking at the sight line of the clock. You're gathering data, and your head and your eyes are moving, and you're picking up critical data. In this case here, you're syncing up eye movement and head movement, which is good. But if you turn it into more of a golf-specific move, what I'd like you to do, Anthony, is fix your gaze on that X right there on the wall. And as your gaze stays there and you turn towards impact now, or actually towards impact, what's happening is you're doing what's called a quiet eye. You're keeping the eyes still while your body's moving. And that's a tremendous benefit when you're preparing for a putt or preparing even for a full shot. It's not that you're focused on the ball. That's the secondary target. Your real focus is your mind's eye, where the ball is going to go. And when you do what you did initially, which is where you're scanning and letting your head move, you're scanning the contour of the green. You're looking at a really good golfer is going to pick up 2 or 3 or 4 very important points. Whereas handicappers, we're gonna be looking at 10 or 15 points that aren't really consequential, they don't really make much difference. And it's the efficiency of that data gathering that separates the good players from bad players.
Amazing.
Yeah, and all this stuff just helps reinforce and develop and strengthen it. Brain endurance training is the way of the future, because that brain endurance leads to emotional balance, emotional endurance. It's all tied together. That's why Core-Tex is one of my favorite tools.